Did I already gush in a previous episode about how I like the entry of the S's? There's a different part of the intro I like every time. Anyway, hello and welcome to another episode of Speculative Speculations. I'm Varsha.
I forgot how cool that is. I'm Jared.
And I didn't need to be reminded that I was last. I'm Chris.
Well, did you get to go first last time when you guys recorded without me for the man
Well,
who
it
killed his
was it
brother?
was a different show and it was a different recording. For those that don't, we haven't spoken. Well, Varsha hasn't spoken to us in like 3 weeks or something. This
Three
is like
weeks,
the
I
third,
think
yeah.
so. Yeah, it's
For
been a
people who
while.
discuss books on, I'd say 2 or 3 sometimes a week.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Right. That's a long
when I
time.
see you guys, when I see you guys once in a particular weekend, and we don't meet for the rest of the weekend, at some point during the weekend, I tell my husband I miss my friends.
Yeah.
So, given that, it was a long time to not be
Mm,
talking, but
yeah.
yeah, it's good to be back. We're going to be talking Orbital today by Samantha Harvey. It is the Booker Prize winner from last year. It might be the first science fiction-ish book to have won the Booker. From the next episode on, we will be discussing A Desolation Called Peace by Arkady Martin. We're going back to that duology we started before my long break, which you may or may not be aware of based on how I publish these episodes, which I'm still getting around to catching up on. We'll get there. But, no short story this week, but as always, we will continue working our way through the short stories in the big book of science fiction. And the short story for next week, as soon as I manage to pull it up from
Is
one of
Where
these
Two
lists.
Paths Cross by Dmitry Blinken.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for being prepared for my lack of preparedness. Yes, so with all that said, we're going to be talking Orbital by Samantha Harvey. What did we think of this book? Question I'm almost scared to ask. Let's go.
Okay, well, I'll go first. Jared normally goes first, but I'll go first here because I think we are likely to have the same thought about it. And I'll start off by saying this is not a science fiction book. This is a book about space, definitely, but it is definitely there is no novum or new idea in here other than you know a group of people decided to go up in a rocket again after Challenger, which I'm at least glad they referenced in some way, which was quite good. And I thought it was pretty. I thought that it was very well written. It had some interesting ideas. A book, it was not.
Yes. It's one of the most beautiful conglomerations of words that didn't go anywhere. uh, yeah, no, like the language was wonderful.
Yeah.
And I kind of compared it to somebody describing a really nice painting, and just listening to them describe a really nice
Mm.
painting, and because the view of the earth was just gorgeous, a gorgeous painting. Um, and to do that for 200 pages got boring really fast. Um, but hey, it's if you're looking for that kind of descriptive viewpoint from if you're fascinated in astronauts and people's how life may be like on a space station, and what the earth may look like from space, um and how the earth moves as you're in a space station below you, then it's definitely something that will work for you. But if you're looking for characters that grab you and you can relate with, and if you're looking for a plot, you're not gonna find it here.
I'm so glad you mentioned plot because as I was reading this book, which by the way I nearly DNF'd, but then I just like 90-page mark I stopped and just skimmed until the 90-page mark. I gave it all the attention. But you know how plot is defined as the events in the book that
Logical sequence of events in a narrative.
right, yeah. So and then I think Epicanovan in one of his videos about these things talked about how there are plotless books, but I was like, if that is the definition, how can there ever be a book without plot? Well, here we have it, folks. Here's an example. Because when there are no events, there is no plot. That's how you do a plotless book, I think. So that was an interesting study in terms of I guess structure and narrative. But what was I going to say? There are no events, right? That is an accurate statement. It because we are getting backstories, we're getting backgrounds, we're getting some like dream sequences, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and mostly visuals of like this might be happening, but they're not actual events. Maybe the typhoon is a little bit of a plot, maybe, but mostly I think it would be safe to say that this is a plotless book, right?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
I mean,
almost like they created the fact that there were 6 characters at the very end of it to sort of give us some sort of coherence at the end. I sort of get the idea that that wasn't in the original draft of this book, that
Mhm.
those 6 characters and those 6 cosmonauts and the international relations and all of that kind of stuff that I thought was going to be kind of developed on and kind of posed, especially the difference between an astronaut and a cosmonaut. I mean, it's very briefly touched on a bit within the history of the space programs, etc., but not. There's no real even thematic drawn on it or point that's being made about that. It's more just observances of life on Earth from space and vice versa. And it does plenty of those, and a lot of those is interesting. And I think it's quite interesting that people would call this or branch this as science fiction, because I think this type of book with a bit of a plot is what classic science fiction does very, very well. And we read a lot of those, obviously, in the masterworks kind of go through. There's just a lot of philosophical observations and ideas that go on in those books, but the most successful ones get wrapped in some sort of environmental or cultural thing that gets tested and probed. So you look at those thematic things within the context of this event or these things that are happening. And as you mentioned, that the typhoon had the promise that it was going to be something, but it wasn't. Again, it was this thing that kept on coming back and round, and then they basically just were observing it from space, its sort of beauty and its tranquilness, and then thinking about what the reality was on Earth when they were kind of viewing it from space. And I can't help but be disappointed, especially with that thread, because it was sort of played out there as they rose and fell and did their circles of the orbit, that it was going, they would have some sort of point to it, and it didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Jared.
I was just gonna say this book was given to us, Vasha, by you for this podcast, right?
I think it was me, to be fair. I wouldn't. I
Was
was.
it
I
you,
wouldn't.
Chris?
Yes, it was me. Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. I thought she was trying to fool us into actually reading more literary fiction instead of science fiction.
No, all my fault.
It's all Chris's fault. All
So
right.
we've like 1/8 made up for Reamd. That's
I mean, I can only imagine this won the Booker Prize because they read Dream D first.
Oh man. But Chris, you said it's not science fiction, right?
Yeah.
That was but technically there's science in it and it is
Mhm.
fiction.
That is true.
So it all depends on how you define science fiction. We're of course used to, aliens and
Absolutely.
spaceships and what have you. But it also is very much in the literary fiction sphere as well, because it's very here and now and modern, and even even not so modern, even a little bit in the past, but
Yeah.
but yeah,
I,
kind of a
I
choice.
think that's an interesting point. I want to sort of discuss that a little bit. The science fiction of it all, right? Like what makes science fiction science fiction? For me, it's either fictitious science, like science that is like mild extrapolations that's still in the realm of possibility, but like maybe it's stuff that's not discovered yet or could be maybe like one of the if you have five theories about something, like one of those turns out to be true, and that's the basis for the world we've built.
Mm.
Or it is existing technology, existing science, but like for projecting how it's used, like Ken Liu did in some stories in the paper Menagerie, for instance.
Yes,
Like
for sure.
there was something about advertising that there was one particular story about advertising, for instance, which is technology that very much exists, but he like extrapolated it to build like put it in robots that like really manipulate your relationships and so on. So this had science, sure. Like although I'm not even sure I strongly agree that it had science, because it had some like lab experiments that it featured with mice and MRI machines, which from one of the reviews on Goodreads I read that it's possible that that's a stretch that an MRI machine would be
Yeah.
on the International Space Station. But I don't know how true that is. Like my source of information is only the Goodreads review. But um, what was I saying? Yeah, and it's not strictly fiction either, right? Like the only thing that makes it fiction
That's
is
true.
that it's got fictitious people,
Mhm.
that it's imagining the experience of being in the International Space Station on. So, like, what is science fiction for you guys? Like, and I know like we're all pretty loose about like genre boundaries and so on. Like, it's not one thing or the other, but I think this book categorically does not belong in the science fiction classification.
Yeah, that's it, that's a good question. I guess the because technically it is speculative, and so it is fiction in that manner. It is no matter how much reality you want to paint it with, it's still made up. It's still fiction, and so it definitely falls in the fiction category. Because it's not a history. It's not a biography, or a textbook, by any means. The and I mean, she's writing about science stuff. Whether or not it's accurate or not is a whole nother,
Yeah.
is beside the point. Um, the so, but that's also like, you know, uh, these categories, they kill me sometimes. That because because like Cloud Atlas is put in the lit fix section, and then
Yeah.
that's nowhere near.
Yeah.
That's
It's completely
supremely
speculative.
speculative,
Yeah.
and so the categories are just so strange,
Yeah.
but which is why we read everything,
Well,
right?
that is true. Uh, I love bookseller Stephen K. Andrews. If anybody watches that YouTube channel, I would say is the foremost kind of sci-fi booktuberish kind of theorist person, would describe science fiction as a genre, especially when you go to the science fiction section in a bookshop. The books that you're hoping to find there are ideas with a novum. And a novum is something that is a new idea, whether cultural, technology, thematic, or something that is extrapolated out and going forward. And this book does not have a novum at all,
Correct.
in any way. It doesn't have a new piece of science fiction. It doesn't have a new even setup. The idea of a space station exists. The fact that there are multidisciplinary and multicultural people on that space station already happens. So it's really just an exploration of the events and the ideas of the people while they're on the space station, the things that percolate through their mind, and then tie some of that back to their experiences on Earth and vice versa. So what they dreamed about as a kid versus about what they dream about now. And I have to say, it might sound like I'm totally running the book down and that we all are. I think there are some really interesting
Yes.
little nuggets within there that I did stop and think about and went, okay, that's actually a really interesting idea, and we'll probably go through some of them. But I
Yeah,
think as
yeah,
a
I got
whole, it could be something different. Like the analogy that I used in my review was that it was almost like, and I said this one to you before, Jared, so you can pretend you haven't heard this before. It's almost like you're painting a wall and you've done a brush stroke on a wall and you went, oh my God, it's a really good brush stroke. That really good coverage and it's come out well on the wall. But as soon as you paint some more, that individual brush stroke is gone. And it sort of melds into the whole wall of the same one color of the wall. And that's how I felt about a lot of the ideas and nuggets that were within this book, is that I would have a moment where it would pose an idea such as this, the when they're doing the experiments in the mice, and they are talking about how the mice are the experiments on the spaceship, but then actually them realizing that they are the mice in Earth's mankind's experiment kind of thing. So there's a really interesting idea that somebody would have, that especially if they only had it while they're standing doing the experiments on the mice. There's an interesting idea, but it's gone, you know, and it's not, it doesn't tie together and fulfill anything at the end. Like, they come back, they don't even turn into Katy Perry when she came back down from space and kissed the ground and was a changed person because of her experiences in space, and she has been ribbed endlessly for it. But at least I can say she had a profound experience that changed her. You can only imagine how dull her life was on Earth.
Yeah. So, wow. You actually didn't tell me that review there, Chris.
Oh,
So,
did it not? Okay, that's
so
good.
that's good. I was
See,
completely.
I haven't seen you in so
I was
long. I'm
completely
imagining
enthralled.
conversations between us.
But to that point, right? I was that thing about the watching the mice and that they are actually the mice actually relates to, that's a theme in the book that actually relates to something she brought up right away on like the first 10 pages or so, when she had the analogy about the painting, and how it was the painting of the people looking at the painter
That's
painting
right.
the painting, and so on and so forth. And so that kind of relates to the mice, the people watching the mice, and they're really the mice, you know, and so forth. So, you know, like you said, there are little nuggets in here. There are little tidbits that tie together, and that you know, thematically they fit. Um, and so they're watching the Earth as well, the same way that they're watching these mice,
Absolutely,
and they're
yeah.
watching the weather on this Earth, and they're watching, and they're thinking about what happens in the various places that the weather's passing over and stuff like that. So it's all a big experiment that they're watching over, and
Absolutely.
there's quite a few allusions to um, them being, you know, like above and like gods looking down and stuff like that and what have you. So there was, like we said earlier, a lot of beautiful language. Like
Oh yeah, definitely.
she definitely knows how to like evoke, um, you know, evoke the sense of beauty, the aesthetic of the earth, and she does a good job at that. You know.
Mhm.
I want to be a little bit of a counterpoint. I did not enjoy the language very much. The I don't know. I felt like a lot of the metaphors felt, or similes felt a bit labored to me. I think some one, like the one about how our body is really a life support mechanism or something. Like there were a few that kind of put me off. But have you guys read Carl Sagan, particularly Pale Blue Dot?
No.
Okay,
Pieces.
this is because this largely felt like that, but on a smaller scale, but like with the
Right.
Earth
Okay.
as focus. And I think like the author sort of, I think, acknowledges it too, or like wears it on her sleeve, because
Yeah.
the book acceptance speech, she quoted Carl Sagan.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And she said, "You like, I'm adding Earth to the equation of what Sagan already said." So, having read Sagan's work first, this felt like a
Mm.
poor imitation to me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can see that. Definitely. Yeah.
But having said that, like, I think the premise, though, I really appreciate that. It is a great setting for a thriller. I'm really sad that it wasn't, but the 16 orbits of it all, and like if
Yes.
you had some like events going through it, it would have made for a gripping tale.
Oh,
Um,
she should have gotten Neil Stevenson to help her out.
Oh,
ooh,
yes, definitely.
yes.
What we need, actually, think about it, right? So Neil Stevenson and Joe Byrne, right? Okay, we'll get the space bears. The menstrual space bears would have
Space Bears.
improved the story immensely.
Yes, that's exactly what the story was missing. Space Bear.
Yeah.
That's precisely what we needed. A wormhole nearby that some space bears would show up from.
And female characters just irresistible to all men within the book, regardless of, rules.
Yeah, yep, that's what it needed. That's exactly what it needed.
I actually, if it had like a speculative element in it, I think that actually would have helped.
Yeah.
Massively. Something that they were spotting. Like, if I was to have an idea, something they spotted away from Earth, if you know what I mean, kind of out in the other direction. So something that was like a reference point, kind of not from looking at Earth. I know that's not the point of the book in any way, but something that they could have focused on or thought about, or kind of thought, and they did that in a way by referring to the flashback sequences when they were kids on Earth, when they were dreaming about space and how they used to play and how they used to dream about space, and then obviously when they're on the space station, they're dreaming about what it's like on Earth. It's like a kind of mirror kind of thing, which again I thought was a little on the nose, but interesting at least. It was fine. But yes, it needed another layer to it, and again, it could have come from the fact that there were 6 different characters. Literally, the only one that had any identity for me was GA, and that's just because her mother died. And the book used an awful lot of the pages to talk about that relationship of between her and her mother, and actually about experience and life on space without that connection with people on the Earth, and the fact that she was going to be buried in the day they got back to Earth, and again metaphors all around that. But she was the only, for me, she felt like the only character in the book. There were other ones, but they were the Russian. This kind of idea. They were just the people that did the experiments. There wasn't really any really great sense of an individual kind of personality and what made them different from somebody else necessarily. So
Yeah. Until you said her name, I forgot it, and I don't know any of the other names at all.
Roman and Anton are the other two that stick in my head. But yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
Roman because he was Russian. He wasn't Roman.
Yeah.
I could have that wrong.
No, I think you're right. But yeah, until about like the 90-page mark, I mentioned earlier that I sort of soft DNF'd it at the 90-page mark. But I was appreciating it until then. It was when I realized that this is not going to change very much. And if I had appreciated the language and the beauty, I would have gone on and continued, but I didn't even like that. So I skimmed. But anyway, until I got to that point, though, there were a few things that I noticed and liked very much. The painting you already mentioned, that one was pretty great. The whole description of it and the metaphor born of it. The premise I mentioned I like. And the third was this, the whole losing a loved one while you're out there. There was one thing in particular that stood out to me that she says that she won't really mourn her mother until she goes back because that's what will make it real. And I kind of felt that, like, she's so far away from most things that make like life and her loved ones real. It feels like she's on a vacation from reality, and it won't feel real to her until she goes back. And that was, I think, a great observation, and really written very well about that. But yeah, that's it. Like the whole the thing about the loss of the mother, I feel like it didn't really mesh well with everything else, especially given the time span that was set in. Like we're hopping around over so many things. If maybe the story had just focused on that one thing while also ruminating on everything else, it might have made a better book for me. But yeah, it those little nuggets that you mentioned earlier, Chris, that stood out, they did, but they didn't, again, like mesh well together with everything else that was being discussed.
Yeah. Well, one great thing about the book is its length. It's really
I knew you were going to
really
say that.
short.
I knew that was where it was going. I mean, that is true because I think if this had been a 300-page book, I probably would have
Yeah. Oh yeah.
given up on it. But it was obviously never designed to be that. It
No,
was
no,
kind of
obviously not. Yeah.
it was
Uh,
designed to be this length and to kind of take you on that journey
yeah.
and ask some of those questions. So
One of the things that bugged me, and Vasha, you mentioned earlier about how some of the on the nose metaphors bugged you, or clunky metaphors that you made. But one of the things that bugged me was the consistent um, like there's a line in here. It's it's barely any difference at all, and the profoundest difference in the world. There was this consistent usage of it's this, but it's not this, but it's not that. It's this thing, but it's not that thing.
yeah,
And it was constant. And I was just like, that there's a lot of waffling. Basically, there's a whole bunch of sitting on the fence and not having these observations be somebody's concrete observations. It was always the omniscient narrator just kind of saying it's this, but it's not that. And it's
yeah.
and that started to drive me nuts after a while because it's all throughout the whole book. Um, and it's either profound or it's not profound. Make an observation and and explain your position rather than just throwing it up there as you think about it. It's this or that, but you think about it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think, yeah, that might have been what bugged me about the observation. Like not that in particular, but
Yeah.
more that they were all coming from the omniscient narrator. If they had been from the point of view of characters who were experiencing, space for the first time or whatever as it may be, that's great. But since it's all from the point of view of the omniscient narrator, like, and I want to say this, tell me if you agree, but I don't feel like any of the existential observations are super new or like
Yeah.
they weren't even phrased in a way that made me think about something in a completely different way. They just were things that I had already read or seen in much more profound language, like Carl Sagan, for sure. And I think some of was it the Challenger disaster that Feynman investigated? I think it was that, right? Or I forget which one it was, but
Okay.
there were all these other things. Like Pale Blue Dot definitely talks about all the voyagers like sent out to space and like what we will do with them. So just none of it felt new to me, even from the point of view of like observations. But if they had come from characters, maybe it would have been fine. But from
Resonated.
the omniscient narrator, it felt like the author saying, "I have this profound thing to say," and I'm like, "Is it though? Is it really?" But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a question. Do you think it's unfair for us to critically evaluate this as a science fiction book because it feels like a book written by somebody who wasn't familiar with science fiction as a genre and has sort of discovered it, written for people who also are not familiar with science fiction? Because as you say, I think a lot of the observations, things like from space there are no borders that you can see in the on between the countries,
Yeah.
is a very on the nose kind of very overused in some way science fiction idea, but maybe not explored in literary fiction in the same way. And if somebody's approaching that from that, they might feel that that is, you know, more awe-inspiring than somebody that reads within the genre. And I sort of was coming away with Marine kind of going, if I wanted a book like this, then I'd be reading a science fiction author, somebody that was very well versed in that area. Well, we're going to read Alistair Reynolds, for instance. So I'd imagine that Alistair Reynolds and Peter Hamilton and those people will have much more profound observations about culture and big corporations and life. And to be perfectly honest, I would even say the Cities in Flight has some of that within it, especially the first book of Cities in Flight is very heavy on that by James Blish. And that while that's a book that we don't love, I think there are definitely novum and really cool ideas through parts of that book that I was going, okay, this is incredibly interesting, and it kind of devolves off that. But what do you think? Do you think because we're science fiction readers, this is almost tainted by our knowledge or our familiarity with I wouldn't even say science fiction, but space, or the way people think about space?
Well, I hate to break it to you, Chris, but this is a science fiction podcast.
Oh, that's right. We're on so many, I forget.
No, you may be right.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm speculating.
What is the yeah? What is the Booker Prize? What is the
So it's a literary fiction. It's a literary fiction prize awarded in England, but it's for books that are written as with English as the primary language. So they have an international Booker Prize for translated fiction, for books that are released in a calendar year that are translated into English. But the Booker Prize itself is for books that are written originally in the English language, and they have a rotating panel of judges every year. It's not the same people who do it every year, so you get wild variations between the types of books that win every year because of that. And realistically, I would say it's a vehicle to sell books, especially new books. You produce a long list, you produce a short list.
Because Midnight's Children won the Booker
Prize.
Prize.
It did, absolutely, yes.
Okay. So it won a prize that usually is won by more literary fiction.
Yes, absolutely.
Genres, I guess, or conventional or contemporary fiction stuff.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, your point's well taken. Basically, that it's not written for us.
Yeah,
it's written for a different audience.
So, the thing is, though, what I'm comparing it to, sure, other science fiction, and it's not like, I think Service Model, not in the same year, but vastly better science fiction for me. Children of Memory, which was in the same period, vastly better science fiction. But it doesn't work for me as science fiction, sure. But my main criticisms of it come from the comparisons to non-fiction, like Pale Blue Dot again, and maybe documentaries on space and some physics documentaries that we've seen, and like all the existential explorations. I think a lot of literary fiction does better too. Like to summarize the existential thoughts here, it's sort of the smallness of humankind compared to the things that, I don't know, we measure ourselves up to, right? Like the importance that the small things take in comparison to the vastness of humanity. There is one, I guess, passage in The Cave that did a brilliant job. Like if the one about how, I guess, the clay represents all of human history or all of history, period.
Yeah.
I think that one passage for me was a much better existential exploration than the entirety of this book. So for me, it doesn't even work as literary fiction, but that's just me. Like I don't. Yeah.
So, Chris, everything you said is pure crap.
I mean, as usual, I'm one of my ideas. Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you. I mean, we have been reading, I would say, an increasingly a bigger bunch of literary fiction, while also admitting that actually, I think this is true. A lot of literary fiction is speculative in its ideas in way more ways than people will ever admit. You know, within that genre. I think a lot of the great books kind of do that as an idea. But I just find it interesting that this would win a big prize like that, just because I'm not really sure who's resonating with it, other than people who have lost their mother recently. You know, I mean, I can definitely see that. If you'd lost a loved one recently, or you were kind of working on that, I can see you finding a grounding in this that did tie it all together, because that is a theme and an idea that is percolated throughout the start, the middle, and the end of the book. So maybe that ties it together for you. But outside of that, I'm not sure. Maybe it's just new for people. Maybe it's just kind of taking them out of their comfort zone and saying, actually, rather than this being about the Yorkshire Dales or about New York City or something like that, this is about people that are still sort of within the confines of our Earth, exploring ideas and feelings that we don't generally have on the planet, but observing the planet. And maybe that's profound in ways that we missed or we already knew, so or had experienced that weren't relevant to us then.
Yeah, that's the key. It's like we've experienced a lot in reading a lot of science fiction, but also just a lot of different genres and a lot of variety. So yeah, I mean, to somebody who hasn't experienced that kind of stuff, this might be a profound and deeply invested book to read about. I mean, I especially like there's one section in Orbit 13 where she breaks down the history of mankind into one calendar year, and
Like that.
I've seen that done before, but I thought she did a pretty cool job with it, just describing that whole process. From the January 1st being the Big Bang, and just going on from there. Where mankind and she conveniently put mankind rising on Christmas. So it was it was clever, and that actually got me through because that's towards the end of the book. So that was okay. I was like, okay, I can make it. I'll make it to the end. But
that section as well, Jared, because it was a setup within a chapter, so to speak, or an orbit within this book that had an idea wrapped around it, which is sort of why I have that brushstroke analogy of, right, you've started off with something, you kind of paint this brushstroke, it's pretty good in its own right, but it's lost by the time you get to Orbit 14.
Yeah.
And it's not tied together,
Which, kind of makes sense. If you were actually orbiting the Earth, would you see something different every time you went around? Would you see a different idea? Would you just see something from a different perspective because you went around the Earth again, and so that stuff like that was pretty cool. If that's what somebody's looking for in a book, then they'll enjoy it for that. Just it's not very exciting as a plot device. That's all.
Yeah, I do think it's a really interesting setup for a way to tell a story or to discuss some existential things like this one set up too. I really love the sequencing of the orbits and how it started out with the 16 orbits within 24 hours, like 16 times day and night.
We got a diagram and everything. It was just like a proper science fiction book where we got a map.
Oh, really? Did my book have a map?
Oh, did you not have it? Mine has like the map of the 16 orbits and the way that they would
that's nice.
Oh, I totally forgot about that. Yeah, it's
yeah.
Oh, nice.
So where they would pass over the 16 orbits, because it's not like the 16 orbits were one way around the Earth. They were seeing the same places again and again. And again, an interesting idea within the book that I didn't really think about is actually the orientation of the Earth. So they would see the world kind of from upside down in this orbit because of their orientation, and what would have been, seeing the world like Africa in an upside down orientation to them would be interesting. I mean, I like that idea, and I went through it. But again, it was like, did it have a point? Again, I thought it was going to come out in the typhoon. I really thought they were going to do something with the typhoon, especially with how violent and monstrous it was in a lot of ways, and their sereneness and calmness where they can't hear anything and see anything. But all we got at that stage was, here, the mice have learned how to spacewalk. It's cool. Which did make me laugh, admittedly.
Yeah.
If only they were bears.
That's true.
Menstruating bears, obviously, so we can sense danger.
Oh.
Oh man.
Oh, that's where that. Okay, now.
Well, it was obviously, her that was. And anyway, let's not go into that. That's a very niche joke.
Please.
It's the most niche joke I've ever attempted. There we
Listen
go.
to our episodes on Dream when I'll post them. They will have
Uh,
come out by the time this comes out. If you want more insight into that, don't subject yourself to
yeah.
Dream. What was I saying though? One of you said something interesting. Yeah, I was gonna say that a lot of the observations in this book would have made or would make great epigraphs for, like some of the science
Mm,
fiction books that we read.
absolutely.
So like this is a book of assembled epigraphs that are there for the picking for anybody to
Well,
just
actually, on that, if somebody had told me that these were a book of short fiction written about a theme, I also would have believed that. Like each orbit was a collection of musings on space. Again, would have
Ooh.
completely made sense, and that's why I wonder whether it wasn't that to start off with, and they decided to put it together in a novella by adding the 6 astronaut cosmonauts in that kind of give it some sort of structure and put
Hmm.
it together. I think I I would not be surprised if that was not an editorial decision when Samantha Harvey was writing this book, and I have something here. I
Hmm.
have these kind of observations and ideas. If I structure them in the forms of orbit around the Earth and assign them to certain characters and certain ideas, then this could be something, you know. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Did the chapters have distinct themes though? And this might have been intentional. This was again something I saw in one of the reviews. Is a lot of the repetition. It may be sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Mirrors the structure of the book itself. In that
mm,
we're talking about just how many times we're going around the planet and like the repetition and the um daily routine slash mundanity of it all. And perhaps the writing style reflects that. But it went on for far too long for me to appreciate it. But if that's what she's trying to do, I think that's pretty cool. Yeah.
mm. Yeah. I also, and I will say this, and I know this is a book that people love, but I feel very similarly about Orbital than I do about This Is How You Lose the Time War.
Interesting. Okay. I
And
love This
you
Is
like
How
that
You
book, don't you?
Lose
Yeah,
the
you love
Time.
it. You love
Yeah,
that
yeah.
book, don't you? Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
I sort of feel the same way about This Is How You Live There's a Time War because I didn't really buy the relationship. So to me, it was just a series of musings
Hmm.
about how they travel through time, and much the same way this brushstrokes idea that you go through. And I couldn't ground it in either a place or a single place in time, and I felt like my reading experience was very like that. But I know that's a book that's beloved by so many people. I mean, people gush and start crying when they start describing that book because of the emotional impact that it has on them, and it just didn't have that for me, which it makes it my problem. But also, this kind of in much the same way mirrors that experience.
Now that's interesting because I'm trying to think how much I cared about the relationship. I don't think a whole lot. Like some of the ways in which they talked about how much they love each other,
Hmm.
that was kind of cool. But mostly, I think I enjoyed the musings because they were
Okay.
the existential musings around time travel and what they were doing to each other. I appreciated that, and it
Okay.
did. I think, from what I remember, it's been a while, present things to me in ways that I hadn't thought about before. It had even like modeled time in ways that I probably would never think of myself. Like this whole notion of time as braids that they were climbing up and down. It was quite brilliant for me. It
Yeah.
worked really well. And that I know that's another book that people find the writing to be somewhat like labored with beauty and metaphors and whatnot.
Mm,
That one I appreciated. This one
not so much.
I did not. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's interesting. But
It
but
might,
I can see the comparison. Yeah.
yeah, it might be interesting to revisit, especially Jared. You haven't read it, I assume. So actually, to do it within a structured read along, because obviously I just read it for fun. I mean, who does that? Who reads for fun without discussions at the end of it?
Go
These
on, you.
What have you
idiots,
been reading for?
idiots. Ah. Mm. On that view, I did say this, Jared, last week. I did a kind of breakdown of my reading for the year, and I had read 44 books, but of those 44 books, I had recorded 31 discussions, which I thought was actually hilarious.
That's wait, is that 31 discussions or that book discussions for 31 of the books? Because we do multiple.
Yes, exactly right. So if you were to consider, Wars of Light and Shadow, for instance, we have done more than 44 discussions in total then for the books that I have read. But yes, 31 of those books are books that have been discussed.
Okay.
It gives you an idea of kind of how we structure reading, I suppose, more than anything else.
Yeah. All good fun. Yes, that is a book that I think I'd definitely like to revisit at some point.
It's not long as well. It's helped by its length.
Yeah, that's true. Cool. Any other closing thoughts about Orbital before we wrap up?
Yes, let's head into a new orbit of book.
Ooh,
yes.
Nice.
Well, on that idea, it has whetted the appetite for Desolation Called Peace.
Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm really hoping Desolation Called Peace was published by Orbit, because then Jared's joke would have so many layers. Damn it! No, it's to our books.
Right, you've got a couple of weeks to workshop a joke there, Jared. I mean, I expect something good.
To our books, okay. Got it.
All right. So we'll see you next episode with A Desolation Called Peace. We're going to be reading the first 4 chapters, covering, I believe, 80 or so pages in the UK edition, which is what Chris used for his breakdown. And the short story that Chris mentioned at the beginning of the
were two paths crossed by Dmitry Belinkin.
Thank you so much, Chris. And we'll see you with both of those next episode. Thank you so much for listening, and bye.